Alan Glasgow was a 32-year-old from Benton, Arkansas. He was a father who had once lived in Canada. In late October into early November 2021, Alan seemed to gradually lose contact with those around him. First with his family, then with his social media friends, and finally with his 2 female roommates. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Dates are one of the most important pieces of information that can be collected in any crime or incident, especially disappearances. However, if you've listened to Unfound long enough, you know that we've had several episodes where the actual disappearance date could not specifically be determined. Everyone who knew the person agrees a disappearance occurred. They agree on a particular date range, but don't ask them to be precise because they really don't know. What if, though, the particular date can't be determined because people who seemingly have no reason to lie give investigators different dates that are nowhere close to each other, being separated by weeks, if not a full month, seemingly as if the person disappeared to each group, one at a time? What then? Well, with the disappearance of Alan Glasgow, his family believes he went missing on one date. His social media friends say a later one. And his 2 roommates have given a date that's even more later. What exactly happened during the final stage? And now a summary of the case. This disappearance is not on the Charlie Project, but it is on NAMUS. To be honest, Alan Glasgow was a rough, surly character at the time of his disappearance, no matter what date you might pick. However, he wasn't always like that. Alan came from a decent family. He was popular with women. Alan worked. He got married. He became a father. Yet eventually, Alan decided he liked the attention from women a little too much, which led to a divorce. Then Alan fell into a meth addiction. He went to Canada, where he threatened a woman with a knife. Eventually, this all led Alan back to Arkansas, where he worked at a gas station and lived with a mother and daughter who worked with him. Through all of this, though, Alan's family knew where he was, and he had a constant social media presence. So in late October 2021, Alan's family realized they hadn't heard from him in a while, although Alan seemed to still be on Facebook, Snapchat, and elsewhere. So the family didn't worry. Then in early November, the social media usage stopped as well, with his last message saying how he was living in a motel but was getting his own place. Then seemingly later in November, Alan stopped showing up at his job. He was never seen again. Alan's roommates were beyond unhelpful, even saying, quote, "It doesn't matter where he is." Alan never spoke of leaving or committing suicide, and investigators still do not have much to go on. This is a curious thing when a person seems to disappear to different groups in his life at different times. It's almost like the Kurosawa film Rashomon, or if you prefer, the Star Trek Next Generation episode, A Matter of Perspective. Look those 2 productions up and contemplate their themes as you try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, was the last message to a Canadian woman about the motel a lie? Number 2, why can't the gas station owner or manager where Alan worked give investigators a specific last date of employment? And number 3, do the roommates' attitudes toward Alan's disappearance tell us all we need to know about what happened? Alan's family can't help but think foul play occurred given his choices and the behaviors of the people around him. The guest for this episode is Alan's ex-wife, Annabelle Lee. Unfound News. I have to start out by once again telling all of you about the new podcast my assistant Carrie and a listener Jill have put together. It's called Missing Chapters. It's on all the popular podcasting apps. They are going deeper into the disappearance of Paul Sanders, episode by episode. Next, the most recent Unfound now is public on the YouTube channel. I cover the disappearance of billionaire Bao Fan from China. In doing so, I analyze the very common practice of some governments disappearing their own innocent citizens for purposes of re-education, abuse, and execution. Finally, my upcoming teachable course is almost ready. It's called How to Podcast Better Than Anyone. Please visit the website and get on the email list at howtopodcastbetterthananyone.teachable.com. To be honest, Alan Glasgow was a rough, surly character at the time of his disappearance, no matter what day you might pick. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the ex-wife of Alan Glasgow, Annabelle Lee. Annabelle, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Good to have you on today. And for anybody who is watching on YouTube, Annabelle is sitting there with her cat, Cinder. So Cinder may creep into the picture. It's a beautiful black cat. I'm hoping actually the cat does creep into the video for at least a few seconds so everybody can see Cinder. Let's first talk about you, Annabelle. You might guess this already. We don't have too many ex-wives of missing, people on Unfound. So why am I talking to you? Of course, you know sometimes ex-husbands can be suspects in disappearances or exes of either gender. But what is it about you that you decided, you know what, I have to take this on and to figure out what happened to Alan?
Well, me and his sister are close. And of course, I have a daughter with him. She's 10 years old. And she's at the point now where she's asking questions. And I'm just trying to get an answer for her.
Right. Just doing the best you can.
Mhm.
Right. And it should be known, maybe I should just state this, there is nothing out there to believe that Annabelle had anything to do with Alan's disappearance. I just have to state that because we have covered disappearances where exes are surely the prime suspects and some have been proven to have done that. So, all right, so you're doing this, you have a daughter together, it makes all the sense in the world. So let's just talk about you and Alan. You were a couple. How did you first meet? How long were you together? What can you say about as much as you want to say about your relationship with Alan, all of that put together?
Yeah, we met when I was 16. Um, we met through mutual friends in high school, and we drifted apart for a couple of years and then reconnected with each other when I was 19.
Okay.
So when I was 19, we got together, and I was pregnant at age 20, gave birth when I was 21. And we got married in 2013.
Okay.
And finally separated, I believe, in 2017.
Okay. All right. Thank you for talking about that. What was it about Alan back then that attracted you to him, to some of his better qualities? What would you say about him?
I was young. He, had the rocker chic. He played guitar, and we liked the same bands, and just clicked over that.
Uh-huh. Had some things in common.
Mhm.
Okay. What about his personality? Kind of laid back, extroverted, introverted? What would you say?
He was very extroverted, very center of attention, very gravity pulling towards him. Um,
Mm,
he was laid back. He didn't care. He had that too cool for school
mm-hmm.
mentality. So,
Mm-hmm. All that was working for him back then.
mhm.
Okay. All right. And what may I should ask, I'm into music myself, and I'm a musician sometimes. What kind of music were you into? You and he, what taste did you share?
Mostly metal, new metal, death metal, just stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm a little older than you and Alan, so I go back to the 1980s Iron Maiden and music like that. I don't know how much I'm into the new stuff, so maybe in a different generation we would have shared the same taste there, Annabelle. Okay, so you two were a couple, and you had a daughter together. And so I have to ask, maybe, what was he working at the time? Were you working at the time? What was he doing with his life other than being with you, being a father back then?
He worked off and on. He did have a bad habit of not keeping a job very long.
Mhm,
He got bored very easily.
mhm. Okay. So it wasn't like he would get in trouble at work. He just would decide, and I'm moving on to something else.
There'd be plenty of times where like he'd go to work and just walk out mid shift.
Let's see. Okay. All right. I'm guessing that might have driven you nuts a little bit, or how did
Definitely, it definitely put a strain on things. We lost a couple of places to live because of that, and I'm sitting here with a fresh newborn. So,
yeah. Right. And is that, if I can ask, is that one of the reasons you were only together for like 4 years to 2013 to 2017? Was that like one of the main reasons, or was it something else?
it was one of the main reasons. Money issues was one of the main reasons.
Okay. All right. So how did he take it? I'm guessing that you ended the relationship. How did he take it when you decided to do that?
Um, we had ended it previously before due to infidelity.
Oh.
Um, then we were working things out, moved back in together, and lasted for like about 6 months before I couldn't do it anymore. Um, he always promised that he'd change, and he never did.
Okay. All right. Everybody is one time, and there was two times in their life has been in the same situation. Certainly, myself as well, though I've never been married, but I can certainly identify with that. Sure. So you broke up, and were there any sort of arrangements with the child that you shared? Any sort of thing that on paper, or did you just kind of work that out between yourselves as far as custody and whether she would see him and all of that? How did that all work out?
We worked it out for ourselves mostly just because neither one of us could afford lawyers. I mean, I
Hmm.
barely just got divorced last November. It took that long for me to be able to pay for lawyers and stuff. So
Wow.
we worked it out between us. I always told him that I'd never keep him from his child. And for a while, he was getting her every other weekend or every weekend whenever he had the time and money to be able to take care of her for the weekend.
What kind of father was he? How did he and your two's daughter get along? How was he?
There were times where he was a great father, like 100% just attentive and all around just like a perfect dad. But then he'd go through periods where he was very aversive to her. He would rather sit there and play video games than pay attention to her. So it was a good 50-50 whether you were going to get the good dad or the absent dad.
Okay. All right. All right, so you worked it out, though, nothing on paper, and he would take her sometimes every other weekend, maybe every other weekend, but his behavior was unpredictable when it came to the kind of father that he was going to be. Okay, let's move on to this. Now, we haven't talked about this yet, but he did have an addiction at the seemingly at the time of his disappearance. Do you remember when this started? Did he have that when you two first got together? Was this something that came and went? Did he go to rehab? What can you say about him, being that you knew him for a long time?
When we were together, there was no substance abuse issues.
Yeah.
Mainly because we couldn't afford it. And I think when I first noticed something was off was when he started dating a girl after me named Pauline, and he, from what I was told, I could tell that his behavior was off and he was definitely on something, but I was told through multiple sources that he was doing methamphetamine.
Okay. Wow. Surprising to you, given that you knew him since you were 16 years old, and it does sound like maybe he had some other issues with keeping jobs and everything. But did the drug thing really hit you from out of nowhere or not?
It did.
It did.
Like I could, if he was smoking pot or whatever, it'd be like, okay, what? Just don't do it while you have our kid. It's just, it's just pot. But something as hard as meth, yeah, it definitely threw for a curve.
Okay. Your opinion, once again, your opinion. Do you think it was this woman who got him into that, or was she already doing it? They get into it together? Do you have any insight into that?
Oh, absolutely not. She was a good girl. She
Okay.
was she was
All right.
she was a good one. And Alan always seems to find his way into trouble.
Okay. All right. All right. We ask for honesty here, and that sounds honest to me. Okay, if that's what it was. That's the way it was, and that's unfortunate. All right. So he got into this addiction, and when you spoke to him, do you ever talk to him about, what, maybe you got to get some help? Did he ever try to get some help? Anything like that between roughly that, I guess, 2017 area and when he went missing in 2021? Did he try to help himself out or not?
Um, no, he
No.
never actually seeked help.
Mhm.
Um, I told him that he needed to clean up, but he never actively did anything about it.
Okay. I'm guessing that might have had an effect on how you felt about sending your daughter over to him or him getting, to see her. I'm guessing it did, but you could maybe say what happened there.
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, when he was with Colleen, we had a phone conversation
Hmm.
where he told me that he didn't want anything to do with Skylar anymore.
Oh, oh, wow.
So he straight up said that he didn't want anything to do with her. He'd sign whatever papers to give me full custody. He just wanted to drop it and run
And did that happen?
for a while
It did. Okay.
until um up until he actually got physically abusive with her,
Okay.
and they broke up and he moved into two friends of his. He moved into their house afterwards, and then he reached out saying that he wanted a connection with his daughter again.
Huh. So he was kind of back and forth, back and forth.
Very revolving.
Okay. All right. So he has this addiction. This could be a huge factor in that. And we do know of people who get into drugs and they just leave their kids behind and aren't very good parents and everything. I mean, we know that. All right, moving on to this. You've already kind of talked about it. You already mentioned the word infidelity. You'd even told me that he was a pretty good liar when it came to women. I don't know how deep we want to get into this, although a couple women are going to play a role here in a little bit. But is this something that he was always like that going back to when you first knew him when you were 16, or is this something that started happening later, the way you look at it?
I was actually having a conversation with my boyfriend about this last night, but
Hmm.
absolutely, it was 100% always there.
Okay.
Always there. When I was 19 when we had re-met, he had come over to my apartment and just never left. And
Hmm.
that's how he moved in. He just came over one day and just never left.
Okay.
And I was cool with that. I was like, yeah, But it took all of 3 weeks before he had taken my phone and was texting a girl and lied about it, saying that it was his sister.
Hmm.
So from there on, from 19 to I think I was 25 when we've separated for the last time, I
Okay.
can't think of a single point in time where he was actually faithful.
Wow. Where do you think that comes from? We of course talk a lot about relationships on Unfound and relationships leading to disappearances, although I'm not sure that's what happened here. But, you already knowing him, you met him very young and he was already like that. Just something genetic or something environmental from his family. Does he have siblings who are like that too? How would what can you put your finger on that?
Um, no, his sister is 100% polar opposite of him. I always, you know,
Hmm.
I make a joke sometimes. I'm just like, Brittany, you're so different from the rest of your family. I was like, you must have been adopted, but
Ah, uh-huh.
um,
Okay, so he was just like that,
yeah,
and might have been like that from the first time he realized that there was women and he was interested in them possibly.
it was almost like a very narcissistic need for attention.
Okay, all right. Was he like that? What about the guy friends that he has? Was he very underhanded with them too, or was he more solid with them?
A very underhanded. He lied. He manipulated his way into there, made promises he didn't keep. Um, I remember one time he had um Skylar over there with them and just like dumped her on his roommate and went and locked himself in his room. And his roommate was like, what do I do with this with this child?"
Hmm. Okay. All right, so that's kind of a guy he was. All right, let's move on to this. You did say that besides the drugs, it sounds to me like he was involved in actually some crime. You told me about one time he held somebody at knife point. What happened there?
Yeah, he had met a girl and she was in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
Oh, okay, this happened in Canada. All right.
He he got his passport, whatever he needed to with her. And he lied to her about having a job. He was cheating on her. And whenever she would go to work, he would say that he was going to work too, but just be out walking around the town. And
Oh my.
I guess between them, push came to shove, and she asked for money to help for rent. And he panicked and went to an underground parking garage and held a lady up at knife point for her money.
Oh my. And but he got caught, I guess.
He did. He was on CCTV cameras. Um, and
Okay.
the girl was actually at work, and one of the coworkers was joking around and was like, "Hey, this looks like Alan." And she panicked and she sent it to me, and she was like, "This is him." Like, so she obviously made the right steps and turned him in. I also called Hamilton, Ontario, and gave them what information I could.
Oh my. This woman that he was with, was she a Canadian, or how did they end up in Canada of all places? What was that?
She's Native Canadian.
She was native Canadian, but he met her in the United States somewhere.
No, they actually met online.
Oh, okay. All right, so they met online, and then he goes to Canada and gets in trouble. Did he spend some time in jail up there, or what happened?
Yeah, he spent about a year in Canadian prison.
Huh.
Because when he went in, it was right around the time that COVID hit and shut
Oh,
everything.
okay. All right, so this was in 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So he gets in there, gets in trouble, is on camera, and then they kicked him out.
Yeah, they put him on a bus back down to Tennessee.
Okay. And and so what did he do once he got back to the United States, to Tennessee? And we have to remember this disappearance happened in Arkansas, but he gets sent to Tennessee. What did he do with his life in 2021 until his disappearance? Did you talk to him? Were you seeing him? What was going on?
I had no contact with him at this point, so I just know based on what his family has told me, because his grandmother, but his adoptive mother, because his biological mother signed over him and his sister to his grandmother. So they call their grandmother mom. Um, but she lived down here in Ashland City.
Okay.
So when he got sent on the bus down to Nashville, he was here for maybe a couple of days. And his brother, who was actually his biological uncle, drove from Arkansas, picked him up, and took him to Arkansas, where he was staying with his biological mother and his stepdad.
Okay.
So he was back in Tennessee for maybe a couple of days.
All right. So he was just there a couple days, gets brought to Arkansas, and you said Ashland City? Is that where? Yeah,
Ashland City is where
that's
his
okay.
grandmother.
That's interesting. And just off the top of my head, I know it covered a disappearance in Ashland City for some years ago. Judith Emke from like back in the 1980s or something. We covered, like I said, maybe 2019, but she went, like I said, she went missing, and I'm pretty sure it was the 1980s. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I think it was Ashland, Tennessee. That's interesting. Okay, moving on. So he gets back here to Arkansas. My understanding is he went to work at this gas station. Hello, Kitty. Of course, all the audio people can't see, but the kitty's sitting there just making an appearance. Um, let's talk a little bit about him getting this job at this gas station. I guess it's called Hilltop. What is your understanding? What have you been told? Maybe your his sister. How did he get this job there? What was going on there?
I'm not sure how he got the job. I know before that he was working at a Denny's out there as a cook, and then stopped working at Denny's. I don't know if he got fired. I don't know if he quit. Um, I'm not entirely sure how he got the job at Hilltop. I just know he did. That's what his biological mother said, that he was working at a gas station.
Okay, just like convenience store clerk,
Hmm.
working the register, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that I need to ask you about this again? Do you think this was his addiction was still with him when he went to Canada, came back, or did being in jail in Canada kind of get him off that for a while? Any insight into that?
Um, his mom said that he acted funny, and she thinks that he was still in an active addiction, but I don't have enough to fully speak on that.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Totally fine. So he's working at this gas station, and he was living. Having it here in my notes. Maybe you could talk about this. Where was he living at the time? He ended up living with a coworker there, or something. What did he end up doing for living conditions or living space when he was working there?
From what I was told and what we know is there was a mother-daughter duo that worked at the gas station, and he ended up staying with either the mother or the daughter, or they both lived together, and he ended up like crashing on their couch.
Okay. All right. And we're not going to use their full names, but what do you know what their first names are?
I have no idea.
You don't know. Okay.
I never got that information.
Okay. All right. So that's the best we can do there. He got this job at the gas station, ends up working with, I guess, two women who were also working there, and then going to live at where they're living. And during this time of 2021, once he gets back, I'll ask you again, talking to him, see him, any conversations he had with the daughter that you share, anything like that during this time.
At this time, it's a really, really rocky road. But so when he got out of prison in Canada, and he had made his home, because what I didn't know was that he got kicked out of his biological mom's house, so he went to go stay with his brother and his brother's wife and their two kids. So I had finally gotten into contact with him, and he said, I'm on the right path. I'm going to start doing better. I want to do this. And at that time, my daughter's mental health started taking a very drastic downfall.
Wow,
Um, she's still too young to diagnose, but she is on medications, and
wow.
she has oppositional defiance disorder. So she rages out very quickly. She at this point in time, she was very, very fight or flight, and 9 times out of 10 she picked fight. And it was a lot. Um
Okay.
so me and him had talked, and because she hadn't seen her dad in a while, I was like, well, if you are 100% on this, you're stable, you're at your brother's house. I know your brother. I've never had a problem with your brother. We used to live with him when I was pregnant. So, I knew that he was in good company. So we worked out a situation where she would go stay with him for the upcoming school year. So, because I thought, maybe a good solid relationship with her dad might help. Maybe he can do something that I'm not doing right. And she wanted to see him. So I made sure that was 100% what she wanted to do. And then me and him talked about everything. I sent him everything he needed. So she went out there and stayed with him. It was the second week of August. Every time I talked to him, she's fine. It's great. Things are working out. There was a couple of hiccups. I was sending him money at the time, $300 a pop out of every paycheck that I was getting. Um, and then next thing I know, he's getting kicked out of his brother's house because he beat the crap out of his nephew.
Wow.
And at this time, like, he's not answering my phone calls. He's not responding to my text messages. This was in November, because it was a little right after her birthday. So I'm sitting here like, where's my child?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like, where's my kid? Well, come to find out, he had taken her and dropped her off at his biological mom's house back in late September and never told us. She was infested with lice. She was dirty. And nobody told me anything. So I'm sitting here freaking out.
Right.
Like, my kid is hundreds of miles away in Arkansas. And I finally got a hold of his biological mom. And, she was reassuring me. She's like, I was trying to find your phone number. I didn't know how to get in contact with you. And, you know, as soon as I got on the phone with her, like, she was like, Skylar's here, she's fine. You know, so she was being taken care of, which was great for me. I was just like, because I was freaking out. I was about ready to drive to Arkansas and just like start
Right.
hunting.
Right. Okay. So he was taking your money. You're thinking she's with him, but he just continued to take your money. Didn't tell you he wasn't taking care of your daughter anymore.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. So all right. So all that was going on, but eventually he starts working at this gas station. He's living with these two other women, mother daughter, and given the, moving into maybe October, of course, and maybe I need to set this up for everybody right now. If you go to NAMUS for everybody, for example, you're going to see that the disappearance date is given as December 1st of 2021. But Annabelle and the people and Alan's sister have been working together. You believe that the disappearance date is well before that? Just to
Yeah.
make sure everybody understands that. It could be early November, maybe even possibly late October, then maybe.
Hmm.
Okay, so just so everybody understands that as we start getting very close to this disappearance date, that this December 1st, we'll get to why that maybe is the date eventually, but that is certainly not the date. Okay, so what about his friends? And he's living with these two. How many people? You told me that he had a very he's on social media quite a bit. Maybe that's how he met this woman in Canada and went up there. um were people contacting him and like, for example, in October, what was going on with him, his friends, his family, getting in touch with each other? Were they keeping tabs on him, things like that?
Um, at this point, all of his friends that I knew and had personal contact with had nothing to do with him anymore. He burnt those bridges.
Okay.
Um, he always had a very heavy social media presence.
Hmm.
Especially like, music groups on Facebook and game groups on Facebook. Um, he was an avid gamer, so he was always online talking to people, Discord servers.
Okay. All right. So he was doing all those things, and then suddenly nothing. Like one day he's on video, or he's playing video games, he's on these others, and then the next day nothing.
No, it's just like he just kind of put his phone down, walked away, and was like, "I'm done."
Okay. Being that I just brought up that December 1st date, where does that date come from? As best as you can tell, why is it written December 1st, even though everybody who knows this disappearance well thinks it's well before that? Where does December 1st come from?
I believe that was the date that his biological mother actually went and filed the missing persons report. I believe.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. Thank you for explaining that before we get into this. Okay, so he's working there, and then all of a sudden, as far as people, even though they've kind of distanced themselves from him, and what do you think, as best as you can tell, what date would you pick out of, just to ask you a date? What do you think is a more accurate date for his disappearance?
The second week of November.
Second week of November. So I'm just gonna, for purposes of this conversation, I'm just gonna say November 10th. Okay, I'm just gonna, even though we realize it might not be that, but if that's the best we can do, that's the best we can do. And I don't think anybody's surprised that maybe we can't get down to the exact date. Um, We have so people realize that he is missing. When does it become obvious to you? When are you alerted? You know what? People haven't heard from Alan for a while. When did you find out about this?
I mean, I had tried contacting him off and on. Me and his sister are always in contact, and me and his biological mother were in contact. And she had been going up to the gas station trying to get them to tell her anything about where he is. Is he okay? And they wouldn't tell her anything. Um, he wouldn't respond to calls, text messages, and I had asked an old mutual friend of ours. I was like, well, he might have me blocked on social media. Can you snoop around and kind of look and see if you can find him?
Sure.
And he couldn't find him at all.
Hmm. Was it like, for example, did he have Facebook?
Oh yeah, he had Facebook. He
Okay.
had, you know,
Okay, I'm just asking. This is just an example. Off the top of your head, when was the last Facebook post that he made? Do you even know?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, that's fine. All right, so this gas station then was close to where his family lived, was within easy driving distance.
I believe so.
Okay, so they hadn't heard from him. They go up there, and the owner or somebody else working there, they're saying, we haven't seen Alan, we haven't heard from him, he's not social media, he's not texting us back, all of this, and the people who are there just like shrug their shoulders, like I don't know what to tell you.
Pretty much.
Okay. Um, at this point, we're doing this interview on April 20th of 2023. Um, any idea who the last person was that you trust who saw him? Can that even be determined approximately a year and a half later? Do we even know who that person is who saw him last that you trust? Their words are good with you.
I think the last person that saw him that I can trust would maybe be his brother's wife when he went to pick up his stuff
Okay, and
after
when
the
was that approximately?
I want to say October of 2021.
All right, so well before whatever we can tell is the best disappearance date. Okay, so that's the last person who you trust, and I always like to bring up trust because we hear a lot of stories about people seeing a missing person, and you're kind of like, well, I don't know if that person's lying. This person, in fact, might be a suspect. So I always want to put in somebody we trust, somebody we believe who had nothing to do with the disappearance. As best as you can did Alan say he was going anywhere? Um, were there any stories, for example, that he met another woman and he was going to go back to Canada or Mexico or anything? Any stories like that pop up at all?
No, nothing popped up. He never said anything about going anywhere.
Mhm.
Um, we did a girl did reach out to Brittany, his sister, um, about having contact with Alan through Snapchat. They'd met on an anonymous website, kind of like Whisper or something like that.
Yeah.
And she had sent us the last pictures that we have of him that he had sent to her via Snapchat. And she said that he told her that he was staying in a hotel room until his new living space was ready to be moved into. And then November, he never got back on his Snapchat.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that conversation. Very important. I think we need to look at that. Do you remember when that conversation or that chat was?
Um, it was the last of October, early November.
Last of October, early November. And you sent me those. Is there, I do have them, and of course, would like to post those publicly so people can see that. Is there I don't know, remember seeing a date on those messages or not, now that I think about it.
Not on those messages, no.
Not on those messages. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So people haven't heard from him. And then eventually, Alan's biological mother goes to police. That's where the December 1st date comes out. And what goes on? The report is filed. And what do the police do? And we're going to get eventually to these two women he was living with. We're eventually going to talk about them and some things. But what did the police do?
Um, I got a call from a detective who, just kind of went down the list of, okay, well, have you heard from him? Do you know where he is? Well, where were you at? And I'm just like, I'm here taking care of a child.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, rule like you said earlier, ex-wife.
It's
So
true.
ruling me out as having anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And I gave them all the information that I had, and they said that they'd be in contact. And I never heard anything back.
Okay.
So we roll through the holidays and everything, and just kind of hoping he'd pop up, because he used to run away. He's a very, I run away from my problems, I'll create them and then I'll run away, and then when everything cools off I'll come back kind of person. And then he just never came back.
Okay. All right. Any searches done at all? We're going to get to once again these two women because this is a big part of this. But any places that he would have known to be, any places that he liked to go hang out, any searches done, anything like that. Of course, we talk about searches a lot on Unfound. Anything done like that?
No, there was no searches done to my knowledge. Just kind of us doing what we can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all the way in Tennessee. I don't have the luxury of being able to drop everything and go to Arkansas.
Right. Of course you don't. Right. I understand that. Of course. Did the police go, for example, when it sounds like his family went up there and spoke to the people at Hilltop, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders. Did the police go up there and at least talk to the manager or the owner or somebody, asking, hey, what about this employee that you had? And what did they say up there?
From what I was told, they did go up there and they did question them,
Mm-hmm.
the mother-daughter duo, and they gave them bupkis, nothing.
Nothing. All right, we'll come back to that. Now, he did have a phone. Do you know if the police ever did any pinging, any phone records? Did they get to see who he was talking to, who he was texting? Do you know anything about that as of us doing this interview on April 20th, 2023?
No, they have not told me or his sister anything like that.
All right, so we have no ping information. He did have a phone, though, correct?
Yes.
He did. All right. It sounds like he used it quite a bit, being that he was on a lot of social media, Snapchat, all those apps. So we don't have any phone info. And my recommendation to you, Annabelle, is that if you can get that information, ask, I would continue to ask about that. That, might be helpful. They might have looked into it already, but you never know. All right, so we have no phone records, even though no phone information, even though you had a phone, obviously on social media a lot. So let's move on to this. These two women who seemingly worked with him at this gas station, you've already said that they were unhelpful. And when the police spoke to them, do you know if anybody in Alan's actual family has ever attempted to talk to them one on one?
His biological mother.
Okay. And do you know what the contents of that conversation was?
From what I was told, is she went up there, was asking questions. They She said that they were just lying to her face, not telling her anything, wouldn't tell her where he was at. And she was basically, well, I'm his mom, I need to know where my kid's at. Even if he is grown, I need to know where my kid's at.
Mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't tell her anything. I think if I remember correctly, she said that they at one point said that, well, if he wants to be in contact with you, he will.
Okay. I have it here that in our prior conversation, Annabelle, that they said something in fact that what doesn't matter where he is. They said something like that.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where he is. If he wants to get in contact with you, he will.
Okay. Were they able to give a last date that they saw him? November 1st, November 2nd, Halloween, anything like that?
No.
Did they even acknowledge that he had stayed with them for a while? Do you even know if
They might have to the detective, but I don't have that information.
okay. Do you you said you didn't know their names. Has anybody looked into their backgrounds to see if they're kind of shady? Any criminal history? Any maybe like Alan drug history? Do we know anything about that part of them?
Um, if the detective got into it, I don't have that information.
Their place, do you think that there was enough at any point for police to go over there like with a warrant and kind of look around, being that it seems that's where Alan was living at least for a little while? Anything, do you know if that ever happened?
No, it never happened.
Okay. Regarding so these two women who were there not being that helpful, at least once again we only have one side of the conversation here and we don't have their names anyway. Um, you'd like to think that they'd be a little more helpful in that. It very well may be they don't know anything. It very well may be they got up one day and Alan was gone. And given Alan's reputation with women, I can't. They just might have said, "Well, good riddance. We don't want him to come. We didn't have anything to do with his disappearance, but we don't want him to come back to our place either." I think we can understand that, given now what we know about Alan. But still, he's missing. Alan's stuff. Uh, Ever get anything back? Did his family, if he was staying there, or wherever else? I'm guessing he had more than one pair of pants, more than one shirt. Were those things ever recovered from these women or anywhere else?
No. So when he got kicked out of his brother's house, he had um two plastic totes to his name full of his stuff.
Mhm.
Um where those have ended up, I have no idea. If they were at the woman's house, they could have thrown it away for all I know.
Okay.
Or he could have left them and took it with him.
Right. Okay. So nobody ever saw any of his stuff again. His phone, of course, is missing with him. And that was that. Let's now go back. We're going to go back to those women one more time. But the Snapchat woman, they met over Snapchat or something like that. They never met in person, right?
Right. They met on a anonymous app that's kind of like Whisper, from what I've gathered.
Hmm. Okay. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure some of the listeners do. It's probably sounds like something I wouldn't do anyway. But okay, all right. So they met over line, but they never met in person.
Correct.
All right. Does this? I'm not. We're not going to get into her name or necessarily anything. But do you even know where she lives? Does she even live in the state of Arkansas?
No, she is ironically also in Canada.
All right. He has something for Canadian women. Okay. All right. So they met over that, and he said, "Why don't you go once again? State the story." About how he was staying in a hotel, but he was waiting for. Why don't we get into that again? Why don't you detail that again for the listeners?
Yeah, so she said that she had been talking to him for about a month or so. And he was currently staying in a hotel and waiting for his new place to be ready to be moved into.
Okay. Now we'll just stop you right there. Since he went missing, of course, you're very good friends with his sister. You know his biological mother. Any news that he ever said that he was living in a hotel and he was going to be moving into another place? Could that be verified by anybody who knew Alan well, who was actually around him, and not this woman in Canada?
No.
All right. So we're going to maybe guess that he was, and of course, this is his history, that he was just giving her a story Like it sounds like he gave many women lines over the years. Anything else about their conversations back and forth? Anything that he detailed about anything else going on in his life? For example, did he ever talk about these two other women that he was living with or this job? Did any of that ever come up to your knowledge?
No, he never told her anything about living with the Hilltop women. He did say that he did tell her that he had tried to unalive himself and ended up in the hospital for a while, but was out and now living in a hotel, and things were getting better, and he was waiting on his new place, and things were going good for him.
All right. And is there any proof that Alan was ever in a hospital anywhere?
None that we can find.
Okay, so his biological mother doesn't know about any hospital visits. His sister doesn't know about any hospital visits. Anybody else he was talking to didn't know about any hospital visits.
No.
And what did he say he tried to do to himself? Why don't you state that again? What did he do to himself?
Tried to unalive himself.
Unalive himself.
Yeah, it's the YouTube friendly version. So
It's the YouTube you're gonna have to maybe for personal. You're maybe what is the actual definition of that?
Kill himself.
Oh, he did. He tried to commit suicide.
Hmm.
He did. Okay. All right. But no proof that ever happened.
No.
In your opinion, being that you knew him since you were 16 years old, does this sound like something he would say to maybe get sympathy from somebody?
Go away. Um, yeah, definitely, 100%.
Okay. You once again, you knowing him, having child together, dealing with him for all these years, that does not committing suicide is not something sound like he doesn't sound like something he would do. Instead, it might just be something he tells people to say, "Oh, well, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" Something like that.
Yeah, it's very much manipulation tactic.
Manipulation. Thank you very much. Very good. That kind of strikes me as the same. Okay, so she had all these conversations with him, and then all of a sudden one day, nothing.
Yeah, just
Uh,
completely radio silence.
okay. Would you say in talking now, have you actually spoken to her on the phone?
No.
All right, just through Messenger or something?
Hmm.
Okay. Did she ever detail how often the two of them were going back and forth?
Every day.
Every day. And so one day talking, the next nothing again.
Yep.
Okay. How did you even find out that she existed?
So me and his sister have been sharing Facebook posts, posting in missing persons group. And a friend of the girl had sent it to her, and she reached to his sister.
Huh. Okay. All right. And you, as best as you can tell, you find this woman believable?
Yeah.
Okay. How long did it take before? When did you find out about this woman, this Snapchat woman from Canada? Of course, the report's filed on December 1st. How long after that did you find out about her?
We just found out about her last month.
Oh, this is very recently.
Very recent.
Wow. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and do you know this woman's name? Have you kind of, I have to be asked, have you like tried to check her out to make sure she's just not, this happens in disappearances, somebody who's just a troll or something?
Yeah, she's credible. She was able to provide information that only somebody who talked to him would know. She had pictures of or selfies of him that he'd sent
Uh,
her.
okay.
Um, Stuff that just a crazy rando crime chaser would have.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I think that's great that you actually checked her out, just didn't take her at her word. Good job for you and his sister. Okay. So we have this woman, Canada. They never met in person. And one day they're talking, the next he is nowhere. Have you ever asked her what she believes the date is that he disappeared? Being that he was the one, you weren't talking to him very much. You hadn't seen him in a long time. She was. Do you happen to know what the best date is for her off the top of her head?
November 21st.
So that's going November 21st.
Mhm.
All right, so we're all over the place here as far as what this actual disappearance date might be. Okay, so this makes it very, very difficult. We got early October or late October, the whole way to November 21st. And, you said the second week of November. Like I said, I just kind of picked out a date of November 10th because that would be kind of be within the second week. All right, so we got these dates all over the map. Now, something.
It's like I told his sister, it's almost like he disappeared in stages. So
Yeah.
he, his child, then he disappeared from the rest of his family, and then he disappeared from the internet.
Right. It's a very interesting way to look at that. I like that. That's very interesting. I'm going to think about that. Okay. All right. So it's very difficult when we can't state the last date that somebody you trust has communicated with the person. I mean, it makes solving any kind of disappearance, whether it's man or woman or drugs are involved or whatever else, it always makes it difficult. Okay. Now I have to ask you about this. I mean, this is actually on his NAMUS page, and it has to do with something I'm calling the smiley face car. When did this come out? Where did this information come from? What I mean, it's on NAMUS, so this must be on some police report or something somewhere. What is this?
Mm-hmm. So the smiley face car, which it kills me because the only thing when I think of when they say the smiley face car was a smiley face killer.
Yeah.
It was I believe the last time that he was seen getting into a car was a car that had a license plate with a smiley face on it.
Okay, like on the front license plate.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And do you know who this person was that stated that?
I don't know 100%. I know his mom said that it belonged to one of the women at Hilltop.
Okay. Okay, and we'll get to that in a second. But who was the witness to this that would even remember a car with a smiley face on it? Any
That
ideas?
I know they won't tell me.
Okay. All right, so this is something come out when the police started questioning, talking to people, maybe the family too. Somebody said, "Well, you know what? Last time I saw him, he was getting into a car that had a smiley face on the front bumper. So it's like one of those little yellow faces with the
I believe
circle.
so, yeah.
Okay, like have a nice day type of
Yeah.
emoji or something. Okay. And so, but this car just happens to be owned by those two women that we talked about before.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And of course, I'm going to say there's more than one car probably in the United States like that, but that sure is a coincidence. And still, these two women have stated we don't know what happened to him. Do we know if it was common for them to pick him up at work? Do we know any of that?
No.
Zero. All that we have is the story, and the problem is we have the story that he got picked up, but this could have been like 2 weeks before he went missing, right?
Exactly.
We really don't know. All we have is a story about smiley face car, and it seems we know like who owns that car, but those people have already been talked to, and they're like, well, we don't know. We're not saying anything. We don't care if he comes back. Nothing. Right?
That's the
Crazy.
frustrating part.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Okay, and I'll ask you once again. You do not know who these women are.
No, I have no idea.
All right. Do you think that his sister or the biological mother knows who these women are? Their names?
His biological mother might know,
We would not
but
make
I
them public, but certainly I would like to check out because I can look up criminal histories and things like that. That might be interesting uh, to know. Okay. Do you even know if they are still working at that Hilltop gas station in Benton, Arkansas?
I don't.
Don't even know if they work there anymore. Okay. All right. So we have this Alan. A lot of things going on in his life. Drugs, drug issue. Has a habit of lying to people, misleading people, lying to women in his life. Went to Canada, got in trouble there, got kicked out of Canada, comes back. Just a very transient lifestyle.
Mhm.
Uh, just seems like he burns a lot of bridges in his life. People try to help him, and then he burns those bridges, taking advantage of people. And then the last two people, as far as we can tell, where he was staying, they're like, we don't know what happened to him, and we don't want to talk about it. And it very well may be he burned a bridge there, and they're like, man, we don't want him to come back, so we're not gonna. We don't. Maybe something bad happened, but we didn't have anything to do with it. It's just so hard to tell without knowing who these women are and knowing, a little bit more about the situation. But they don't want to talk about it. Where are you at in all of this right now? Of course, as you just stated, you got this important information from this person on Snapchat about a conversation, which I is somewhat helpful. Maybe thinking it's lies anyway, but still, So what? This is a fairly new disappearance. What are you and his sister doing, like maybe not on a daily basis, but weekly basis, as far as trying to reach out to people?
We are still scouring social media looking for any traces. Just keeping up with posting. Um, she went out to Arkansas um and gave her DNA, I believe.
Okay.
And also was asking questions and was looking around out there. And she went to the detective as well and was giving him more information, um really just upfront pressuring them to do something.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and that's where we are right now.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, just a question. Do you believe it's very possible that being that this just happened within the last couple of months, the Snapchat woman, do you think it's very possible you might hear from some other women he was talking to online or something
Oh,
like that?
without a doubt.
Without a
If it's
doubt.
one thing Alan loved, he loved the attention of females.
Okay. What about I'm not a gamer. I've never really been a gamer at all, but I understand that if you're into video games and that's what he was doing, a lot of that stuff is online communicating with usually it's mostly men who play video games. Anything like that. Have you thought about going into one of those chats, maybe some popular game that he used to play online and start asking around? Maybe he had a screen name that he used, anything like that.
Yeah, he was big on PS4, specifically Dead by Daylight groups, Friday the 13th, Overwatch, stuff like that. And his gamer tag was Lullaby for a Sadist.
You see.
He was a huge Corn fan, huge Corn
Okay.
fan.
Okay.
Um, so I've gone into gamer groups and I've had other people, fanning out in Discord servers and stuff, and we just turned up nada.
Okay. And I do want to reiterate, no searches done around the Benton, Arkansas area. I mean, I have to say I don't even know where you'd start, but I don't know the area. But
Yeah, no searches have been done.
okay, very good. Do you have a Facebook page or website, anything like that, set up, or maybe his family has set up for his disappearance? Anything like that?
I believe his sister is working on one right now.
Okay. So a Facebook page or something like that?
Hmm.
Okay. And I hope that when it is set up, you'll send it to me so I can link to it. We'll get the listeners to go there and follow it. And um, I have to ask you that is, how has this family reacted to this? Of course, you're the ex-wife. You, of course, would love for him, I think, to be found alive, even though you are the ex-wife. Of course, you have a daughter together and everything else. But it seems like he's burned bridges with a lot of other people who maybe aren't as connected to him, even maybe it be a sister. But you two have a child together, and that's a little different. How
Mhm.
has his family reacted to his disappearance, given, everything that he did to them and others?
They're all worried.
Hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, family's family, and they just they want answers. That every time I talked to his mom, she'd ask me, "Have you heard from him? If you heard from him, would you tell me? You wouldn't lie to me." And I was just like, "Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. If I've heard from him, I'll tell you." Um, and his grandmother, his mom, the one that raised him, um, her health has been declining, and she just wants to know he's okay.
No, right.
Like
Have you
everybody
ever
just,
has he this comes up, when we cover disappearances of people who have addictions, a lot of times people with addictions do disappear and then they come back. They'll be gone for a couple weeks and we don't know where they are and they won't say where they were and everything, and then one time, of course, they go missing and they don't come back at all. Did Alan ever do anything like that where he went off the grid for a couple weeks, nobody heard from him, and then just appeared again? Was this something that was part of his life or not?
yeah. I mean, with me specifically, he did go off the grid a lot. Um, but I always knew where he like this sounds so creepy, but I always knew where he was. Just because
Mm,
he always like a really big paper trail.
okay. And if you can say, when he would go silent with you, where would he be?
Usually shacked up with a girl or just avoiding responsibility. Like I said, he was really good at starting a fire and walking away from it until it went out and then coming back going, "Oh my God, what happened?"
Okay. All right. And maybe I should ask you this as well. Regarding this addiction and everything, does anybody who was maybe having more dealings with him, late October into November, was he back? Was he using meth quite often? Was it anything else, heroin, anything like that? Or was that it? Or what was going on?
I believe there was a fentanyl addiction in there as well.
Oh,
Um, that's what I was told. And I'm not sure if he was using or not when he went missing, but I mean, once an addict, always an addict.
you can always, yeah,
It's
right. Even if you get sober again, it's always something you're going to be working on. Sure. Okay, so we have to. But how was his health otherwise? Of course, drugs don't do anything good for the body, but otherwise, was he eating okay? Was he taking, did he have any health issues besides his addiction?
um he had a heart murmur. I don't know, he has a heart murmur.
Okay.
Um, but other than that, no, he was fine. The last time I saw him in person, he looked healthy. He, had gained a little weight back to him and
Mhm.
he
Okay.
looked okay.
Okay. Any final words before we complete this interview, Annabelle?
Yeah, if you know something, say something.
Okay. And once again, we remind everybody, Benton, Arkansas. And what part of Arkansas is that in? Where is it?
Um,
Is it near Little Rock? We covered a lot of disappearances in Arkansas over the last 6.5 years, mainly because my assistant Emily is from there. But where is it in Benton?
um,
Where is it in Arkansas? Is it? I got, maybe I'll just ask you this: is it a long drive from where you live now?
from where I live,
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to say maybe 4 hours on the other side of Memphis. So it takes me 4 hours to get to Memphis, and then when I get to Memphis, another 4 hours to get where he was
Wow,
at.
8 hours. Okay, so that's not close. Okay. So, all right, Benton, Arkansas is where he disappeared. And that place, I don't know if I'm going to do a map video or not, but this place that he was working at, this hilltop, that's what it's called, Hilltop? That's what it's called?
That's what I was told. It was called Hilltop. And I mean,
Okay.
a lot of gas stations have like nicknames from the locals and stuff like
Right,
that.
right.
So
That's right, they do. Okay, so I'll look into that a little bit as well. Annabelle, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that was my April 20th, 2023 interview with Annabelle Lee, ex-wife of Alan Glasgow. I thank her for appearing on both audio and video with her cats for this episode. Knowing you, the audience, the way I do, my guess is you're highly suspicious of that mother and daughter who seemingly were about as unhelpful as possible to police. Really, the quote, "It doesn't matter where he is," says it all. To analyze their words and actions, though, we must really look at Alan instead. What I take away from the interview with Annabelle is that Alan hurt, at least emotionally, if not physically, every woman he encountered, maybe even his mother. So we must remember this, meaning we must be open to the idea, although these two women had nothing to do with Alan's disappearance, their experiences with him caused them to not want him to reappear either. They could very well view him not being around anymore as a blessing. The counter-argument to this reminds me of Eddie Murphy's Raw comedy routine, where he talks about how women are very forgiving people, much more than men when the topic is cheating and mischievous behavior. For example, many women will stay with men who get sent to jail. But my impression is most men will dump their wives and girlfriends should those women get incarcerated. But women will only bend to a point. Then watch out. Did Alan push these women too far? He could have. That was his modus operandi going back several years. But then we must wonder, why couldn't these women come up with a story regarding Alan's disappearance like men have done when causing their wives' disappearances, instead of just being unhelpful, thus making themselves look guilty of something? I don't have a good answer to that. As we continue to study disappearances, maybe we'll find those answers. Although given the complexity of the analysis, we may not find them till the final stage of our education. If you'd like to hear and read my deeper analysis into Alan Glasgow's disappearance, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast and sign up. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.